It's the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm, episode number 158. I am Mike Grimm, voice of the Golden Gophers, and welcome back to the podcast. A new era of Golden Gopher baseball officially begins this weekend when the Maroon and Gold takes on Houston in a 3-game series starting on Friday in Texas. First-year head coach Ty McDevitt is at the helm. He's taking over for the legendary John Anderson, who retired at the end of last season after more than 4 decades as head coach. Ty rejoins us on the podcast this week. This will be his second visit with us, and he'll tell us about how the offseason went, how his team is stacking up, and what it will mean to him to get his first game under his belt as the leader of this historic Golden Gopher baseball program. Our Go Gopher Podcast is presented by alumni-owned Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're a business founder planning to exit your business, start by contacting Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. Sunbelt serves more businesses up to $5 million in revenue than anyone, and True North M&A serves companies with revenues up to $150 million. Get a confidential, no-cost, no-obligation business valuation started today. Make the most of your life's work. Visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. And our thanks to Brian Slipka. He leads the True North and Sunbelt Group, a great guy and a great supporter of not only the Go Gopher Podcast, he's a big baseball fan for the Golden Gophers as well, and I'm sure he's listening to the podcast here today. Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union is also a big sponsor of the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm. Life math is complicated, and Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union makes it easier with local financial experts available to help in person or virtually. Go to affinityplus.org/Go Gophers for more info. That's affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. They have an award-winning mobile app, so download that as well. The Go Gopher Podcast is also presented by OnX Maps. Find out how to download the OnX Fish app for free by listening to the Go Gopher Podcast. We're podcasting episode 157 from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We invite you to subscribe to the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to subscribe, and it's free to listen at any time. You can go back and listen to previous podcasts as well. Last week, for example, we talked Gopher football with new linebackers coach Mariano Sori-Marin and with softball coach Piper Ritter, whose season got underway this past weekend. We had 2 separate episodes last week. Go back and have a listen to both. This week, we're talking Golden Gopher baseball with new head coach Ty McDevitt. He'll join me next.
I'm Clay Geary, walk-on turned scholarship wide receiver for Gopher football.
And I'm Ben Utek, U of M alumni, Super Bowl champion, and Tony Dungy Uncommon Award winner.
We understand championship culture, which is why we're part of the True North family of companies.
True North invests in only elite teams, like the champion team at Sunbelt Business Advisors, Minnesota's largest seller of companies. To learn more about True North and our diverse family of independently owned companies, visit TrueNorthEquityPartners.com.
Keep the good times rolling without the regrets. Giggly THC beverages are your go-to for bold flavor and smooth vibes. 0 alcohol, no bad decisions. Just THC-infused cocktails, seltzers, and teas packed with natural ingredients and performance-boosting superfoods like ashwagandha and ginseng. Find Giggly at over 500 locations like Total Wine, MGM, and Cub Foods, or shop online at giggly.com. That's Gigli.com. Ready to upgrade your drink game? Use the code Giggly North, as in Giggly Talk North. Giggly North, Gigli North, for 50% off your first order. Giggly, sip smarter, feel better.
It's episode 158, and we are talking baseball. Yes, that means warmer weather's on the way. The Gophers open the season this Friday, a road trip to Houston to take on the Houston Cougars. And first-year head coach Ty McDevitt returns to the Go Gopher Podcast. Good to see you, Coach.
You as well.
Well, how is this week handling it for you in terms of you're going to be, we know you're the head coach of the Gopher baseball team, but you're going to be in uniform on the field in a real game on Friday?
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion attached to it, both for our guys and for myself. We've got a new staff. We've got a handful of new players, and we're going south. You know, I think anytime that you get in the game week, we've been in the indoor, and we've had good competitive practices in the indoor, but we're playing people wearing the same jersey color, and now everything's different. So to pretend like it's the same old, I'd be lying. It's new. It's different. You wake up on Monday morning and it's like, okay, it's game week now. So we're excited. You know, we just had a staff meeting today to go through some scouting report stuff, to go through our pitching rotations, go through an expected lineup for us and for Houston. So the routines change quite a bit, and then obviously on top of all of that, the responsibilities are different. I'm doing media appearances and trying to make sure I got lineup cards and rules and all of the head coaching responsibilities. You figured out where typically this time in previous years I'd be buried in a hitter report, and there's still plenty of that, but some things to pile on for sure. Yeah.
And what about just you mentioned it could be an emotional time too. Here, you're a guy that grew up in Minnesota. Baseball's been part of your life since you could probably, first put a glove on. You are from Apple Valley, played at Eastview, played for the Gophers, have been through some ups and downs. At one point, a volunteer assistant here, and now taking over for John Anderson, 14, who for 4 decades plus was the head coach here. How do you think that? Will you think about that? Have you thought about that? How do you think that will hit you as you take the lineup card out?
Yeah, I don't know if I've had too much thought about the big picture on all of it. It's been more about, hey, how can we execute today and execute on this practice, this drill, get the most out of this day. So I haven't really thought a lot about it. It's not really in my nature to think big picture on that type of stuff. I'm sure at some point, somewhere along the line, whether it's that first game, maybe weeks into the season, it'll hit me a little bit that like, hey, this is really going. But I certainly don't spend a lot of time thinking about that type of stuff. I just like winning. So if we're winning, like just keep doing what we're doing.
and you have kind of dived in, it sounds like, into the process, and there's not time to think about some of that other stuff.
Yeah, I think anytime you get stuck sort of wandering down that road, you quickly slap yourself in the cheek and say, hey, let's get back on track here. We've got a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah. One other quick question on John Anderson. How much have you been in touch with him since you took over? I know you were on the podcast a few weeks after you got the job, and I'm curious how that works, because you guys have had a great head coach mentorship. He's done so much for the school, and I wonder for him how much has it been hard for him to step away? Has it been easy? Have you heard from him a lot? How has that been?
John's been as involved as I've wanted him to be, and that's like anybody who knows John is like, of course he is. Like he's good at that too, right? Like there was some times where stuff, we got into fall practice and it was kind of a new tempo and some new systems and stuff like that, and didn't really have a lot to connect with him about. And he came out to fall practice, and it's not like we weren't in touch at all. But it wasn't very often. And then it's funny, you start getting closer to the year and you're talking about some of the stuff that you don't think about it as head coach responsibilities, whether it's certifying rosters from an eligibility standpoint, whether it's some of the rules and the rule changes that go on year to year, whether it's the lineup cards and, hey, what is said at a head coaches meeting at home plate? Like I've seen it how many thousands of times now. I've never been a part of one of those. Do I need to have a speech prepared? What I do? Do I need to bring something out there?
Yeah.
What actually goes on there? So there was a handful of conversations that took place kind of day over day where I just had questions that kept popping up on, what happens in this circumstance? What do you do here? And of course he handled it like a champion. Didn't make me feel dumb at all.
Yeah.
But
he didn't laugh like, what do you mean?
No, I mean, he can give it. He can give it. He can take it. And he's great. But so it's funny how just there's kind of seasons of everything, and that's our sport and that's life in general. But I've certainly leaned on him harder the last month or so with just some of those nuanced questions. And then one of the cool things that was discussed last week, as you're starting to figure out, like, okay, I'm a head coach now. I'm used to charting, pitchers mainly, right? And I've got to have a better understanding, and I've worked hard to learn the other side of the baseball, and clearly brought in 2 good guys in Sean and Connor to work with our team. But in game, what are you doing? And John always kept a chart, right? He kept a book, but it's not the same book that everybody else knows is book. The book goes back to Connie Mack. And so Connie Mack taught Dick Siebert taught John. And so then John now is excited to teach me how to keep book like Connie Mack did. And so we've connected on that. And I had I would say I'd had like a cursory understanding of what the book process was like and what the lines, and I mean, if you looked at it, it looked like hieroglyphs if you didn't know what you were looking at. but it tells a real good story about the game. It's a lot more than what you just get out of a standard book. And so John was excited that tradition was going to be carried on in the next staff.
So give us a little insight on that. What kind of things are we talking about? It's not like if I were watching the game, everyone's, hey, if you're keeping score at home, that's a, E3 or whatever,
sure.
Which I might write in. Is it some of that plus other things?
It is some of that, but so in any given score box, you can tell what the count was, what pitch it was, what location it was. You can tell where the ball was hit, the type of hit it was, whether it was a looping line drive, it was a missile, it was a well-hit, backspun ball. So there's a variety of different symbols that are used to tell you not just where the ball was hit, but in what hole was it hit, between what two guys was it hit, who fielded the ball, who had an opportunity to touch, all of these things in a very small box, and when you look at it, you're like, how can it possibly tell you all of that? Well, if an arrow has 1, it means this. If an arrow has 2 lines coming out of it, it means this. If it has 3, it means this. If it's oriented in this direction, so you look at it, and again, it looks like hieroglyphs. It's numbers and letters and F's and A's and C's and B's. And it's very, even for a baseball minded person, if you just looked at it, you'd be like, okay, I can see we had a 2-2 count and he hit a fastball away, but after that, you're going to have to help me, And you think that will help in-game some management, and then also you can go back and reference it after the game? Once you understand the system, you can essentially look at the book from any game and really be able to visually play out exactly what happened. If you looked at a standard book, I'm thinking about it, you probably have you have a result on there, 1B, and maybe a dashed line through the 5-6 hole or something like that. But it doesn't really tell you how hard the ball was hit. It doesn't really tell you where the pitch location was. This tells you everything.
Yeah,
this tells you everything. Yeah.
How do you think you'll handle the game responsibilities? And you mentioned you were charting pitches, calling pitches. Will you still do that with the pitching staff now?
So Alec will call pitches, and that's a strength of his. I really. I like getting into the process of scouting reports and, really being able to dive into kind of the pregame management of that type of stuff. Alec does a really good job in game of having a feel for, clearly what are the hitter's weaknesses, but also what are our pitcher's strengths. We talk about that a lot as a coaching staff. And it's funny, I was talking with the twin staff about that when we were together at an event it can become very difficult when you have as much access to technology that we do and to data that we do to avoid trying to play to your opponent's weaknesses and forget about your own strengths.
Sure.
And I think Alec does a really nice job from a pitching standpoint balancing the two. He finds intersections, and we're able to attack hitters' weaknesses when they mesh with pitcher strengths. And when we get stuff that, maybe doesn't fit exactly where we need it to, he's really good at looking at it and saying, okay, we're going to dive into our pitcher strengths, and it's going to be best on best here, and that's what we've trained for.
Yeah.
So he will be handling the pitch calling responsibilities. That said, pitch calling is always a collective effort. There's always people that have input. I'm the head coach, so I'll have final say on that. And if I want something called, we'll do that. Catchers will have a hand in calling the game. We tell our pitchers they've got a hand in calling the game. They've always got the opportunity to shake off. It's even though he'll be the one punching it in, it'll be a collective effort. And then just from a game management standpoint, there's no, big concerns in regards to gaping holes that I feel right now. Now you ask me after week 1, and I might, I might have some sleepless nights.
But let's say first, early in the game, first and second, no outs, maybe in some cases be a bunting situation. Is that going to be the head coach's decision, or will that be the hitting coach's decision, or how do you handle that?
I brought Connor in here to run the offense, and so he'll be in the dugout with me. Sean will be coaching third base, so Connor's going to have essentially full reign to run the offense that he wants to run. Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't talked a lot about what I want to see from an offense and the capabilities that I'd like to see, the strengths that we'd like to possess. There's clearly, with certain guys up, there's things that you're limited to be able to do. So I wouldn't say that we have a hard set in stone style that we're always going to do this, we're always going to do that. I think those teams are predictable anyways. But for the most part, he and I will work together on that, but we'll both be in the dugout, and he's got a tremendous feel for, again, not just what the game calls for, but also what our guy is prepared to execute, because that's really what it comes down to. You can look at the numbers all day long, but if the kid can't get down a sack bunt or, can't elevate one over a center fielder's head, it's not going to do a whole lot for you. Yeah.
When you came on here the first time after you got the job, you talked about the fact that you have a great respect for the Gopher way about baseball that John Anderson and the guys before him helped go. But there's also some new things that you wanted to incorporate. How has that happened? And when fans come to watch the Gophers, there's always kind of been this is the way the Gophers play. Is there something that there are a few things that people will notice that will be, okay, so this is a little new wrinkle?
Yeah, I think our goal is to, in some ways, just revive the best qualities of Gopher baseball. And when you look at it, none of it's groundbreaking. None of it has a stamp of Ty on it. It's the best teams in Gopher baseball have played extremely hard. They've been extremely athletic, and they've played extremely well fundamentally. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And so the newness is simply newness in the emphasis on, hey, we're going to show up to practice every day. We're going to show up to every game, and we are going to take care of the baseball. We're going to throw the ball over the plate. We're going to put the ball in play on offense. We're going to put pressure on opposing teams. So that will be the only unique part of it, is the emphasis on doing the things that when we've had good teams here, we've done really well. So I would expect to see from a fan's perspective, like, oh, wow, there really is an emphasis on getting on and off the field here. There really is an emphasis on only pitching guys that can command the baseball and throw it over the plate. There definitely is going to be an emphasis on, and you're going to see our guys. I mean, we've got a physical ball club this year. We're athletic, we're strong, and that's been kind of a day one emphasis, is like, let's make sure that we build a group of elite level athletes as well as ball players.
Yeah, and that was my next question. Are you liking how that part of the game is taking shape? If you liked what you've seen here in preseason workouts, going all the way back to the fall ball when you guys were first implementing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, there's always growing pains, and I think one of the growing pains that we've experienced this year with the emphasis on the weight room and on practicing really hard, we've had more soft tissue kind of freak injuries than I would have expected, and again, you can call that a naive young coach. You can say that that's part of the process. You can say that's the value in having a deep roster, all of the above. And again, believe me, I've had the internal conversations laying in bed at night is, are we doing too much? Are we pushing the guys too hard? But I told them right away, and I haven't broke stride on it, that we were going to challenge them from day one. Practices were going to be run fast, and we were going to adapt, and guys have. So, we've got a few injuries on the offensive side of the ball. We've got a few injuries on the pitching side of the ball. Do they correlate directly to that practice pace? Maybe, maybe not. It's always hard to say, but we definitely aren't as healthy this time of year than I'd like to be. Luckily, we've got some guys that are going to be coming back, maybe not the first week, maybe not the second week, but certainly before we jump into Big Ten play.
All right. Let me talk about a sponsor real quick, and we'll keep talking Gopher baseball. We want to talk about Affinity Plus. It's your local credit union, proudly serving Minnesota since 1930. If you're a current Gopher student or a proud Gopher alum, that makes you eligible to join this financial that wants to build a meaningful banking relationship and put you first. You can meet with a local employee at any of their branches statewide, including right near campus on University here in Minneapolis. To learn more and find other ways to connect, here's the webpage, affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. That's affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA, people-centered banking, perfect for Gophers. Ty McDevitt with us. It's episode 158. They open the season, the Gophers do, against Houston on Friday. It's a Valentine's Day season opener, and then it's a 3-game set this weekend with the Gophers and the Cougars. You mentioned the rosters, maybe a few injuries. You like the depth. Obviously, pitching so important. How do you like what you've seen from your staff so far, and how do you think that will, how will you navigate through that in terms of establishing, maybe a rotation and who will be middle relief, late relief, all that stuff?
Yeah, so at the moment here, we're going to start Cole Selving on Friday night, and he's a transfer from Texas. Cole's a Eau Claire, Wisconsin kid, and I mean, he's going to be a real good competitor for us. And I'm a big believer that you start your best competitor on Friday nights, maybe not your best stuff all the time, but your best competitor, because you can either put yourself in a position on Friday night to have a good 3-game series, set your bullpen up for success. But if you run somebody out there and they give you 2 innings of, kind of sloppy baseball, a lot of walks, a lot of wild pitches, the whole weekend can deteriorate fast. So I like Cole in that role. We'll start Kyle Remington on Saturdays in that second day, and then we'll start Justin Thornsteinson, who's a 5th-year senior, on Sundays. And I like that group. Again, you've got enough stuff there to win at a high level, but you've got 3 bulldogs that I would not have any problem stretching any of those guys up to and past 100 pitches. They seem to get better when things get worse, which is a good sign for a guy in that position. And if we're gonna have a good ball club, those guys are gonna have to throw 80+ innings for us on the year. So I like what we have there. Middle relief, you got to look at guys like Will Whalen, Seth Clausen, and some others that are going to help us kind of bridge the gap between the starters and the back end, and then in the back end of the bullpen, we've got a transfer from Utah Valley. He was at South Dakota State before that. Another 5th-year senior, and Eli Sunquist. Iron Range kid.
Yeah. Sounds like a good Minnesota
name. He's a tough son of a gun. He's got a hard fastball with the most over the top arm action that I've ever seen, and a good breaking ball to complement it. And then Noah Rooney, another Northern Minnesota kid in the back end. Perham, he's been injured and banged up. He had a knee in football in high school, and then he had Tommy John surgery last year. He had a freak injury this year with his finger, and so he's pitching kind of banged up right now. And it really hasn't hampered his competitiveness on the mound. So I like what we have there, and especially like our top 8. Yeah. We got some strength there, and the fact that you run 2 Northern Minnesota kids out of the bullpen in the back, like I put my money on those guys all day long.
No doubt about it. Tough guys playing. Growing up, learning to play in that cold weather makes you tough, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
How about batting order? How do you like where you're at there? Obviously, you got to score runs if you want to be good.
Yeah, so the top of our order kind of writes itself, and again, you can sit around and play analytic games, you can play field games, and we do as a staff. But right now, the top of our order will look in some form or fashion like Josh Fitzgerald, Weber Niels, Drew Birkland, Charlie Sutherland, who is a Northwoods League All-Star, and a good left-handed bat. And then, you look at the middle of that order being a combination of Easton Richter, who's a transfer from St. Louis, but a Rosemont kid, Jake O'Beary, who's out from Massachusetts, and then, sort of that bottom order, what we call it, essentially, secondary leadoff guys, right. Really. So we got Easton Richter and Jake O'Beary, and then Jamison Martin, who's a freshman that's played really well for us. Jake Larson, who's another veteran presence, and then we've got Jack Spanier, who's going to be a shortstop for us. So we've got some depth and some length at the back end of our lineup that I like there. And then the one guy that I think everybody's like, why didn't you mention him, is Jake Perry. He's one of the guys that I've talked about that has had some he's got a knee injury, a lower body injury, nothing serious, but he's probably not going to be ready to break with us.
He was on a preseason watch list.
Yeah, right? On paper, he's probably our best hitter, left-handed hitter, but unfortunately, he had an issue. Ironically, we've got these safety bags that we're using now. So it's a second first base that allows for a runner's lane, and the NCAA has gone to implementing the safety base. ironically, we've had a handful of injuries on the safety base.
So much for safety, huh?
Exactly. So that's that's been something that is,
weird.
Yeah.
I like the safe base. I've seen it used sometimes. It seems like it should be safer.
And in theory, it makes sense. The problem is that when you get a new base that is got like a lacquer on it because it's painted, orange, and you got two options, orange or green. Ours is orange. It's got a slickness to it, and it's got a firmness to it. It's not broken in like a normal base, and so guys, if they don't hit it perfectly, they can,
skid on it.
And so we've had a rolled ankle, we've had a hyperextension, we've had a handful of guys topple over that thing, and about 3 weekends into our indoor season, I said, "Get that thing out of here! I don't want to see it.
Go break it in somewhere else."
Exactly. So
get somebody else breaking that.
Ironically, we've had more trouble on the safety base than we have with anything else.
That is crazy. I want to ask you, just because he's been in the news, and you can talk how you want about Luke Ryerson, because I think it's an interesting story. He's going to be a football player. He set the record in the All-Star game for longest field goal. It sounds like he's probably going to punt at least at some point for PJ Fleck. He's supposed to be in high school right now, going to play, would be playing baseball for Eastridge, but he is currently, if you look at gophersports.com, on your roster. So what is his situation right now with the Gophers?
Yeah, so he called me, oh boy, it would have been just after Christmas, maybe even just after the New Year, and it expressed that hey, I'm looking at potentially enrolling early. It had really not been on our schedule. He hadn't thought a whole lot about it, but I think as baseball season started to approach and he had thrown some bullpens, he's like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. And obviously we'd take him. He's the number one ranked pitcher in the state. And so in an area that we need depth, he's going to be able to add some depth for us. Now, I don't think he's going to be ready right away. He's on a high school, program right now. And we don't want to push that along for the sake of his career. So he's definitely behind our guys by maybe a month. And so I would expect that as we get deeper into our U.S. Bank schedule, maybe that third, fourth, fifth weekend of the year, he'd start to get some opportunities, but he's certainly behind the rest of the guys in terms of athleticism and stuff. I mean, it's what you'd expect.
And he's a lefty, right?
He's a right-handed pitcher. He's a right-handed pitcher, but he can move the baseball. He's got 5 pitches, legit pitches. Yeah, we just got to ramp him up responsibly. I think there's an urge there to kind of put the cattle prod on him and say, hey, let's go. And that never works well with kids, and especially somebody who's coming in. And I mean, you want to talk about a schedule? Like, everybody thinks they're busy. Look at that kid's schedule. Yeah. He's got, it's new to him. He's doing college classes. He's working football. He's working baseball. I mean, kid's busy. He's busy, and everything's new. And he's taking it in stride. He really is a mature kid. I would have never let it happen for a lot of incoming freshmen, just because it requires a maturity level that only a few have, and he's definitely got it. So he's been awesome. The guy's got a nickname. They call him Riker. I still don't know where it came from. But he's Riker to the guys, and I think that's I've called him that a few times now, just accidentally. So and I think he's got a nickname for football. He told me, but I can't remember what it was. But he's been a fun presence to have. It's added some life to the roster. And of course, we're in the middle of football, or in the middle of baseball practice, and I've got to tell him to stop punting the football, and it's not him. It's all the guys are like, hey, see how far you can punt this football. And he punts it into the rafters, and everybody cheers. And so it's been fun to have. That's pretty cool. Yeah, Ron.
Of course, he was an Alabama commit at one point, and then the coaching changed their switch. So then all of a sudden you're able to talk to him. PJ Fleck is able to talk to him. How do you foresee the springs going with him? Because there is spring football. And football, this is not anything new, these January enrollees, but they don't start the real season till October, and it's a good deal to get a spring practice under your belt, get school started, all that stuff. Well, if you're a baseball player and you come in January, the season's underway. So how do you think long-term the schedule meshes there in the spring, obviously during baseball season?
Yeah, there's a script here for it with, we've had a handful of baseball, football guys in the, recent history of our program with Eric Decker and Jacob Herbers and Drew Himaleski. So it's not uncharted territory, but it's also not super easy. We've got to respect the NCAA rules allotment, right? You only get 20 hours a week, and that's for both sports.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
So there are limits to what he can do, and for him, because he's so competitive and he wants to get involved and all of that, we've got to pull him back more than he'd like sometimes. I think he wants to be at everything and do everything, but we want to make sure that he's settled in school and taking care of what he needs to and getting some sleep, So it requires a lot of communication between our staff and the football staff to just make sure that, yes, he's taking care of business on the baseball field. He's going to be able to throw as many innings as we possibly can this spring. But also, I mean, what fun it would be to have him be the starting punter and have our whole team out there every Saturday supporting him.
Yeah, right.
So
no doubt.
Yeah.
I wonder too, with Decker, I think at one point I'm trying to recall he was such a he had been such a presence in football. There was, I think, a time where the football staff said, "Look, we know what we got in Decker, and we're okay without even PJ, like with Ibrahim that barely played in spring." So there's some, and with Ryerson as a punter and kicker, it's not like he's learning. I'm not saying that's just makes it easier, but it's not like he's learning a 75 play page book every other night, right, as a punter or kicker. So maybe that will make the transition a little smoother.
Yeah, I think it's easier than being a quarterback for sure. Yeah, right. that there's no doubt about that. It doesn't. There's still some nuance. Like I said, a lot of stuff that people don't even realize, like the NCAA compliance rules that we've got to navigate. Clearly, there's systems and plays and stuff that they want to get implemented now that he needs to be a part of with football. And then there's the whole cultural thing. He's in two different locker rooms. He's got to get to know two different teams. Like I said, it's a unique position to be in, and there's very few people that can handle it. And I've been super impressed with his maturity so far. So I'm hoping at some point, there's a little bit, of settling that happens both with the baseball and the football stuff. And when he's at baseball, he can fully be there. When he's at football, he can fully be there. But to some level, there's always going to be a little bit of back and forth, and the football staff's been awesome with us so far. So
you mentioned he's the number one recruit in Minnesota. You've hit the ground well, and I don't know what you can legally talk about now or not, but you've got to be pretty pleased with how your first handful of months here have gone recruiting, particularly in state, right?
Yeah, I can't comment on any individuals, but just in general, we've done really well, especially in state, and that clearly was an emphasis when I took over. We've got to keep the best kids in state, and I think a lot of that goes, to our assistant coaches and the staff in total, the work that they've done to get those guys excited about being Gopher ball players, and making sure that they see the vision for our ball club. So, I'm excited about where we're at. I'm excited about the future of Gopher baseball and what we have in state. There's always going to be transition with the transfer portal and the new age of college athletics when we stop using that.
Making a whole new podcast on that, right?
But anytime that you can create future stability through the best players in state, I think it's always a good place to start.
It gives you an extra heartbeat.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And anytime that kids are going to their club facilities or to their high school teams and talking positively about the University of Minnesota and wanting to be Gopher ball players, like that's a great thing to happen. And I think Gopher baseball is really cool right now, and that's exciting to see.
No doubt. Let me read one more sponsor. I got a couple more questions, and then you got to get ready for the week ahead. Ice fishing is here, and that means it's time to hit the frozen water with OnX Fish. It's the fish app and the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your confidence on the ice. Use OnX Fish to help find new places to fish. You can sort by lakes and by species, by abundance, trophy, and keeper potentials. OnX Fish also shows you hot spots, lake-by-lake regulations, private and public land ownership info, and more. And for a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more info. That's onxmaps.com/fish. It's the app that's changing the game on ice. A couple quick questions, and then we'll let you get out of here. You mentioned earlier the U.S. Bank Stadium schedule. I think when you and I talked the last time, it was pretty much up in the air. We weren't sure whether there'd be openings for you guys to host, and now it looks like it's a pretty robust schedule, and you got to be happy about that.
Yeah, I think the only weekend we lost in there was that third week of the year, which is historically that Cambria Classic weekend. So we just got confirmation actually last week that'll be back in 2026. So that's exciting. We'll have a good slate of games in there next year. And then this year we've got Purdue. We've got our bye week in the Big Ten, which is going to be High Point here. And then we've got a smattering of really good non-conference games. You've got Kansas coming up for a double midweek. We've got NDSU and SDSU. St. Thomas in there. So we've got a lot of good games to look forward to inside US Bank Stadium. We just did a walkthrough last week, and every time you enter that place, it's like, man, it just the vastness of that indoor facility grabs you every time that you're in there. So definitely excited to get back in and make it a home field advantage for us.
Yeah, and it is it's kind of a surreal almost situation with the sun able to come through, right? And so you got guys indoors maybe having to wear sunglasses depending on position. How important is that, though, that you're not on the road 14 straight weeks and you get some home opportunities here?
Well, it always matters. It matters for practice time. You know, a lot of times when you're traveling on Thursdays, you miss a practice time. If you get in late enough and you have flight delays and all that stuff, you miss a practice on Thursday. That matters for the development of your ball club. And then you just look at trying to keep people healthy, whether it's from illness or from soft tissue injuries, sleep, recovery. We know how important that stuff is. And when you're on the road every single weekend and you're leaving early mornings and getting back late nights, it takes a toll on everybody. So just that alone, it's an advantage. And then clearly when you play in that ballpark, and anybody who comes to watch a game there knows how unique of a ballpark it is. It plays really fair. You know, really, like you talk to opposing teams, they come in and they're like, man, I'm so surprised at how fair of a ballpark this is. The dimensions are fair. There's clearly some quirkiness, especially at the old Baggy and Wright, you know, and we remember the Metrodome days. And so it's kind of like that. But it plays fair. The surface plays fair. And it's a great place to host ball games, you know, so it's an advantage, a whole host of different levels. And
guaranteed games. Like you just don't know. You could fly to Texas next week and, you know, get rained out.
That's what I'm looking. That's all I'm doing is looking at the radar now and trying to figure out, okay, we can have another, you know, doubleheader here. Yeah. You show up there, you know exactly when batting practice is going to be, you know exactly when the game's going to go. And there definitely is an advantage to that.
Probably too, some of the guys, you have a lot of Minnesotans on the roster that have to be Vikings fans. It's probably cool for those guys to go in there and play on the field where Justin Jefferson scores a touchdown. Yeah,
they love it. Sometimes too much. We got to ban footballs because they want to recreate all the plays in the Minnesota Miracle. And it's always the first day. It's like, hey guys, we got to get used to the surface here. Come on, yeah. But it's fun for them for sure.
You have a tough schedule. I glanced at it more in depth. I know it came out obviously a few months ago, but I glanced at it more in depth getting ready for this. You got Houston this weekend, then you got this tournament in Texas that includes, you know, some tough teams. Oregon State is in that mix, I think, and then Arizona State is a non-conference. Take me through the scheduling philosophy and how it came together.
Well, I was really there's only a couple opponents that are my schedule on there because the way that scheduling happens, you do it years in advance. So this is mostly John. You know, John had got us in the Round Rock Classic and with Houston. I scheduled Arizona State because that was that Cambria Classic weekend that we had to fill. And so some of it comes from strategic RPI, you know, that type of scheduling. Some of it comes from, you know, just trying to keep our guys within at least one time zone if we possibly can, with having to go coast to coast now within league. But sometimes you just don't have that many options when it comes to having to schedule games late. So, when it's all said and done, what we have this year is we've got a really competitive 9-game slate to start the season off. We've got Houston, who's a historically really good Big 12 ball club. You know, we were going through their pitchers today, and I don't know, you'd be hard-pressed to find another team in the country that has the stuff that they have top to bottom. Now, they were kind of strike ball this past year. Fought some command issues, but they've got some, you know, guys who are younger that are older now, and that typically seems to clean up with age quite a bit. So you're going to see some really good arms. They've got one of the more highly touted junior college transfer classes in the nation. That's hard to scout for, as you can probably imagine. So they'll be a real good ball club. And then we go to Round Rock and you play, you know, 3 teams that in one publication or another are all ranked in the top 25 in the nation. what a great opportunity for our ball club. It's a great event, super professionally done, and you're playing world-class competition. So our guys are going to get broken in.
Is that at the minor league facility there?
Yeah.
Great.
It's a great venue, and they do it right. They've got all the sponsorships and great ball club. So that'll be a fun event for us. And then Arizona State, Tempe, Arizona. Like, if you're going to go to a place and really kind of get acclimated to college baseball, Arizona State's on the short list, right?
Yeah, or blue blood, right?
Absolutely. So it's exciting. It's a bit daunting at times when you look at it, but at the end of the day, once we get through that 9-game schedule, you're going to know what you have for a team. You're going to know where your blind spots are and what we need to clean up. And it's going to all get exposed, good, bad, and different. And so I think that's always a good place to be heading into Big Ten play.
And then you add Big Ten play, and it's now a new league, 18 teams, 4 new ones, all good, right? I mean, Oregon, USC, UCLA,
all good,
all good. You go to Oregon, and I think USC comes here. Yep. So how do you look? And it's up to 30. It's a 30-game schedule now for the league, right? It had been 24 for years. I think.
Years. Yeah. Yep.
So how does that all? How do you look at that now from the 30,000-foot view of the new Big Ten?
Well, a few things. The Big Ten tournament now has 12 teams in it, so we've gone to like the traditional ACC model with the pools and all of that. So they've done it right there in terms of opening up the tournament. And then you add all the quality teams, you add the coast-to-coast travel. It's not getting easier. And like I told our guys, like, hey, if you're looking for easy, this is the wrong place. We are going to play really good competition. We are going to play in really tough venues. And like I said, I'm going to use the word hard, but I'm not going to use the word impossible. Yeah. Right? Like, that's the difference. So dive into the hard, love the hard. We're going to buy into that, and we're going to love it. But don't make any mistake about it. It doesn't mean just because it's hard that we're going to not feel like we got a chance. So that part of it is exciting. And then anytime that you can go to, like you said, any of these blue blood programs, whether it's USC or UCLA and the history that they have there, Oregon's got a beautiful stadium out in Eugene. I mean, it adds to the player experience. Like, they're going to be able to travel the entire country and play the best competition in college baseball. What more could you want? You, I'm sure, have spent years in Minnesota, and now with the Gophers, hoping these April games at Siebert Field that you get these great weekends of 80-degree weather, and it's one of those, offshoots or, outliers. However, I wonder when USC gets here for April 25th, 26th, 27th, is there a small part of you that hopes for a 32-degree weekend? Yeah, I was wondering about that. Like, yes, we want great weather, but the Trojans are coming to town. They're used to LA. Yeah. What if it's 38 degrees in late April, which it could be? Yeah, well, because we've added, the 2 weekends on the front end of the Big Ten schedule, there was a lot of conversation at our Big Ten coaches meetings about, hey, what's the weather going to be like at that time of year? Because everybody's concerned about, especially the Southern teams are like, hey, what are we walking into at that time of year? So, when I look at our schedule and I see that we're expected to play outside at Siebert Field the last week in March, I go, oh boy, I really hope we can, get some warm weather that week, and then we're home the first week in April. And then I look at the USC weekend and I go, man, maybe we could have some unseasonably cold weather. Flurries, exactly, and really get the Southern California boys broken into what Minnesota baseball is all about. So at the end of the day, you clearly can't control the weather, but you look at the schedule, and I'd be lying if I didn't have that thought a few times. When I saw it, I'm like, that would be because I always thought, even in football, right? Like USC late in the year coming in here, going to Madison or Ann Arbor, someplace when it's 22 degrees or something. That would be an interesting experience. Well, hey, we'll let you get back to it. We've kept you a little longer than we promised. I've still got a whole list of stuff. We'll have to have you back on because we haven't talked about roster limits, NIL, transfer portal, junior college eligibility. We got lots of stuff we can talk about, right? See you next week. I'll see you next week on all of that. But the bottom line, this is a game week, and man, it's exciting, and good luck, and it's going to be fun watching. Thanks, Mike. All right, there he is, Ty McDevitt, Golden Gopher baseball coach. It's episode 158.
My thanks to Gopher baseball coach Ty McDevitt. As you can tell, I'm high on the future of Gopher baseball with Ty on the bench. I hope you enjoyed hearing our conversation as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. Go to gophersports.com for the Gopher baseball schedule and get yourself some tickets and get to some games this spring. Episode 157 is presented by Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're buying or selling a business, visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. We're also partnered with Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, a locally member-owned full-service financial invested in you. You can learn more at affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. That's affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. Affinity Plus, banking for Minnesotans, with you from Pee-wees to the pros. onX Maps also sponsors our show, Happy Fishing. Again, I'd invite you to listen to past podcasts, and please be sure to click the subscribe button to the Go Gopher Podcast right now. It's free to subscribe and free to listen. And please share the link to the podcast with others so they can subscribe and listen as well. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please let us know. Give us some positive feedback on your social media channels. We'll talk again next week.